Hi everyone. In this video we're going to discuss what is a pivot point and give a couple of clear examples and explanations of what a pivot point is. This course is really centered around pivot points and how to trade with them, and it's important to know what a pivot point is in the first place. On this chart right here you can see I'm on the Australian dollar US dollar, and with the free indicator that we have been giving out with the course, it will put daily, weekly, and monthly pivot points on your charts for you. You don't have to plot them, you don't have to add them every day, you don't need to adjust them. You just put the indicator on, it will calculate everything for you automatically, and you're done. And the indicator will look like this. Now, I'm on the 4-hour chart. Whatever chart we're on, we can see a series of pivot points. The larger the time frame, the more we can see. But let's look at the 1-hour chart for a moment. The blue lines right here are daily pivot points. Those little guys are daily pivot points. Now, a daily pivot point means that the level is reset every day. So every 24 hours we get a new daily pivot point. I have some lines right here, these dotted vertical lines that separate my 1-hour chart into 24-hour periods. You'll see two that are very close together, and that's from the weekend. But the rest of them will represent a 24-hour period. You can see that these daily pivots get reset every 24 hours. Now, here is a weekly pivot point. It's the green line. So again, the blue little guys are the daily pivot points, and the green thicker lines are weekly pivot points. Now, a weekly pivot point, the concept is basically the same as a daily pivot point, except for we're looking at a week period instead of a one-day period. So daily pivot points are reset every 24 hours. Weekly pivot points are reset every week. Now, if I go to the 4-hour chart right here, you'll notice that these dotted vertical lines now break my 4-hour chart up into 1-week periods. So I'm looking at about 5 or 6 weeks worth of movement right here on my 4-hour chart. You can see that that green weekly pivot point, that thick line right there, is created every week and it's reset every week. So here's 1 week. Here's the next week, it's reset. Here's the next week, it's reset. Now, don't worry about the fact that it doesn't go all the way to the end of the week. It resets on Thursday as opposed to Friday, and that's just how the indicator is set up. But that covers the whole week, and this is our current weekly pivot point right here. So now we have daily pivot points and weekly pivot points. Now, one thing to remind on with this indicator is that pivot points that are not touched during the period they're created will extend a line all the way to the right of the screen. So that's why these daily pivot points go way out there and so on, because the market hasn't touched that level yet. There's definitely going to be a lot more information on that. Now, on this same 4-hour chart, and even on the 1-hour chart, and on the daily chart as well, we can see the purple lines right here. These are monthly pivot points. Now, I'm on my daily chart, and these dotted vertical lines are now representing a 30-day period, a 1-month period. So this is 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, and so on. These monthly pivot points, just like daily pivot points and weekly pivot points, are created every month. They're recreated every month. They're reset. So here's our monthly pivot point for September. Here's October's monthly pivot point. Here's November's monthly pivot point, and December, and so on. Now, again, we can see these on pretty well on most time frames, but it's easier to see daily pivot points on 1-hour charts, and weekly pivot points on 4-hour charts, and monthly pivot points on daily charts. Now, as far as what a pivot point is and how they are calculated, a daily pivot point is calculated from the high and the low and the close of the previous day. So pivot points are always the typical calculation for a pivot point is the high, low, and close, all added together, divided by 3 gives us our pivot point. Right? That gives us our pivot point for the current day. So that's how a daily pivot point is created. Same thing on a weekly pivot point. High, low, close divided by 3 from the previous week will give us this pivot point. So if we're looking back at last week, that high, low, and close will give us the current level for the pivot point this week. And same thing with monthly pivot points. High, low, and close divided by 3 gives us the level for this month's pivot points. And that's a brief explanation on what a pivot point is, how to identify them, how to find them. I hope it was helpful. Thank you, everyone.